This is Taya reporting for the Real News Network in the battleground state of Pennsylvania. We're here in this battleground state and we've been on the ground for 2 days. We've been going to the polls, we've been speaking to poll workers, we've been speaking to people who go to the polls to make sure that everyone is voting in safety and in peace. Now, unfortunately, Pennsylvania doesn't allow early voting, and they've also changed some of the restrictions around absentee ballots. Stephen, can you tell us a little bit about these changes?
Well, we're here in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, which is, sort of a small city in Pennsylvania, surrounded by sort of a sea of red. Yes. It is a sort of a liberal enclave, and of course, so in Pennsylvania, different than maybe our state of Maryland, is that every vote counts here. So every vote is critical, and one of the things that's interesting about Pennsylvania, unlike other cities that allow people to actually go in and vote in person before the election, Pennsylvania only has mail-in ballots, or what is called absentee ballots. Now they changed the rules a little bit to allow more open absentee ballot, but they did not increase the ways for people to drop the ballots off. Yesterday we were in Lancaster at the only spot in this entire locale where you could actually drop off a ballot. What's critical about that and what's important to remember about that is that, as we said before, this is the battleground of battleground states. Many people feel like the election will pivot off what happens in Pennsylvania, and therefore these absentee ballots are very critical, because it seems like many people have decided, because of COVID, that they don't want to vote in person and they want to vote in an absentee ballot, but they're under controversy because Trump has already said he doesn't want them counted after midnight. Now, what's important about that, and what we've been talking to people about here, and what we've been asking voters about, is the fact that Pennsylvania is not allowed to count votes until election day. So basically 2.7 million or almost 3 million Pennsylvanians have voted by absentee ballot, have dropped their absentee ballot off, and yet they can't start counting until this morning. So this is going to be very critical, and I think it's going to be very pivotal in the terms of how the American election system works or really doesn't work.
Okay, so before we get into what voters said today, we want to talk a little bit about where we are, which is Lancaster. And Lancaster is a study in contrast. It is a blue city full of minorities and immigrants that is surrounded by the reddest of reds. Stephen, can you talk a little bit about Lancaster and some of the differences in the surrounding counties?
Well, when we venture right out of Lancaster, it's extremely conservative. But Lancaster is an extremely diverse city. In a way, these two cities, or the areas sort of representative of the Democratic versus the Republican Party. I mean, the Republican Party is majority white, and the Democratic Party is much more diverse. Yes. And so goes Lancaster. Lancaster has an Hispanic enclave, African-American neighborhoods, and white. But, pretty much when you get outside, from what we've seen at the polls, it's much less diverse, let's say. So, it's really interesting because you see sort of the conflict in this country and the conflict over voting like side by side here. And of course, in this state, that conflict or that sort of difference becomes critical because every vote is going to count in Pennsylvania. So what we're going to do is we've been up here before. We came here in 2018 for that very reason, because we saw this contrast, and we were following the campaign of a progressive congressperson, or running for Congress, Jess King, who ran on a progressive ideas package, and she eventually lost. But let's run the package so you can see what we found in 2018, because it's very interesting to compare to what's going on in 2020 now.
This is Taya reporting for the Real News Network in Ephrata, Pennsylvania. When newcomer and Democratic candidate Jess King began closing in on the Republican incumbent, we wanted to know how her progressive message was resonating with Trump voters. Our journey started here in the offices of Lancaster Stand Up, a coalition of residents organizing for a progressive candidate, Jess King, who is running a surprisingly close race in the conservative 11th district.
Like, when we're knocking doors on Trump supporters, yeah, they might not use the same terminology that progressive politicians might, but when you say, hey, do you want health care? How are your health care bills? Yeah, everybody's struggling with that.
The group calls voters on the phone and canvasses door to door, but not with a message of Democrats versus Republicans. Instead, the grassroots organization has been focusing on core issues like Medicare for all and getting money out of politics.
So there's been quite a few. I personally know a few people who are registered Republicans that plan to vote for Jess.
It's an approach the candidate, Jess King, described as top to bottom, not left to right.
And I think what we see is that voters aren't necessarily on a left to right spectrum as much as they are on a bottom to top spectrum.
A way of campaigning for issues that affect and appeal to people. It was a theme that resonated throughout a town hall in a small library outside of Lancaster, where King talked about why she was not only shunning big money from Washington PACs, but had concerns about the Democratic Party and its reliance on corporate money.
That politics as usual is this You know, us and them, you know, they're bad, we're good. It's not that way. I think both parties have failed us in many ways at the national level.
Well, what we're finding is that issue-based politics, if you will, is much more effective. People here, they think Democrats and they think, you know, the horns and the tail and all that. But when you get to talk to them about the issues, we agree.
Now, what's interesting is while people have been very concerned about issues like health care and minimum wage, a new issue that we've been hearing about is concern about the voting process itself. It's something we didn't see in the previous election. There's a lot of anxiety and a lot of concern about fraud. And that's why we went and spoke to CASA, which is an organization that is dedicated to help turning out the vote. Now, they do focus primarily on the Hispanic and Latinx communities, but they also reach out to everyone, to African Americans and to everyone that they can to help them exercise their right to vote. Stephen, can you talk a little bit about what we learned from CASA?
We went over to their headquarters, and what to me was interesting was that unlike, you know, some of the Democrats who have not done door knocking, they were sending people out to door knock because I think they feel that getting turnout in Lancaster will be critical to the vote, the eventual vote count. So they were sending people out door to door knocking because of a lot of voter anxiety. What they were talking about was voter anxiety, and it's almost become more in this election. It's just the fact that I get to exercise my right to vote that seems to have superseded any issue. So let's listen to some of their thoughts and hear what they had to say.
They're really upset about what's going on. They say, hey, in the modern history, they never have a president who behaved like the Syrian president. So they don't want they don't want the next 4 years. They want to vote it out.
To be honest, in all the doors that I have been going, they are very motivated to go. They are saying, yes, I'm going to vote. There is only like 2 people for all the door that I have been know that they say, no, I don't want to vote. I don't like none of the president. So, but almost everybody is very motivated to vote.
So, you know, we know like 4 years ago, out of about 200,000 voters who are Latino in Pennsylvania, only 100,000 voted. So what our goal today is to increase that. We're very hopeful. And we'll see.
We also spoke to a woman named Lourdes who told us a very interesting and very troubling story about the lengths that she and her husband had to go to vote. As a matter of fact, her husband's vote had been discounted in the previous election. So let's listen to Lourdes herself explain what happened and how hard they had to work to make sure that their votes were counted this time. Okay, look, at least we're voting in person because we're worried they will lose the vote by mail. We went to the elections ballot center to ask for an email or for a message to confirm that our vote, my vote, and my husband's vote were counted and received. But my husband actually received a card that said that his vote was not counted in the 2018 election. It wasn't counted at all. So we were worried that his vote wouldn't be counted again, even though we had participated as we were supposed to. So we went to the office today, very early today, so that my husband could submit his vote in person, so that we wouldn't worry and we could make sure his vote had been received and counted for this presidential election. We really needed verification that his vote was counted for this presidential election because it had no effect last time. And we're worried. We're Hispanic, and we want to make sure our vote is counted because of the changes we want to see in our society. Because in 2018, the process didn't work for us. So what's going to happen this year? It's enough to drive you crazy. Will they deny his vote again, or will it be counted this time? Now, we didn't just stay in the progressive enclave of Lancaster. We went to the surrounding counties, and believe us when we say it is a sea of red. And we spoke to many Republicans out there, and they were very concerned about the ballots. And it's sort of difficult to reconcile, isn't it?
Well, yeah, one thing that was interesting is that we actually talked to a Republican official about the idea that Trump has said that the ballot should be stopped counting at 12 o'clock tonight, even if they come in after, even if they're postmarked before the election. And let's just listen to our conversation.
Well, the position on the Republican Party itself, I couldn't speak for. I can only speak for myself. And my opinion is that I believe, even though the courts agreed to that, I found that a little strange because I think that election day is election day. It's always been election day for a particular reason. And to count votes 3 days out, sometimes I wonder myself if there isn't a contingent of people that would be holding back their vote and then turn in their vote to try to skew the numbers, particularly if it's a very close race.
So, in all honesty, it seems like voter suppression is a major theme here as well as around the country.
Right.
Stephen, what do you think is going on?
Well, what I think is that, there's been a lot of misinformation put into, sort of the media continuum. And you've seen these things like, we were talking today about how people were saying, yeah, I heard there's voter fraud. So they put
But they weren't actually able to name the source of that information.
And let's listen to one of those thoughts. Let's listen to what someone says about it.
Do you have any concerns about the election process?
Yeah, I've heard some things. I'm not sure how, it's hard to know what's really true and what's not, but yeah, I've heard some things. I guess it is a bit concerning. Yeah.
All right. So
Which things have you heard?
yeah, have you heard any?
I heard like some lost mail-in ballots. I've heard like people like filled out a ballot and then they forgot to sign, or they went somewhere and somebody had stolen their mail-in ballot. Just all kinds of things.
That they could not be done correctly and that the people don't understand, and then they wouldn't count their votes, and all those things I think many times happen to people, especially as they're older.
Oh, and on the news, you see, they report some of the post offices, they go in and they find whole stacks of these envelopes that are supposed to be going to here or wherever, and they're just laying there.
There's always going to be fraud, because there's always going to be somebody, well, like when people send in votes for people that are dead and things like that.
So what's interesting here is this is really not tangible, but what it does is it becomes a means to justify saying we can't count all the absentee ballots, we can't trust the process, or something is going to happen, and it's only going to happen on the other side, not our side. And specifically, to be honest, we heard this more amongst the Republicans than we did Democrats. And I think it shows the effectiveness in some sense, and I mean that in the most negative way, that if the Justice Department putting out that press release saying they found 9 ballots in a trash can or something has literally taken off and become a seed for an idea that the election itself is not going to function.
Now, throughout the day, we have been traveling throughout the county to talk to voters, to ask them about what issues are important to them and what's driving them to vote. Why don't we take a listen to some of the people we spoke with today?
I feel like the morality of our country has gone down to a terrible path. And so for me, it's really important for us to become unified. And the health issues that we have right now, health insurance, COVID, I'm all about improving the economy, but if you can't meet the needs of the people where they are, then we've lost a lot. And so it's about character, morality, and ethics, and doing what's right for everyone, not just for a chosen few.
I voted because I think it's important that we remain free in our choices. My Christianity is important to me, and I would hate to see us not being able to go to church.
But it was really nice to have a vote, to have an opinion. They take care of me, and they take me into account. That's what really matters.
So what's interesting is that people weren't as much focused on the issues as much as they thought this was an existential crisis of left versus right, Democrat versus Republican. Stephen, what was your feeling?
Well, if you listen to the SOTs, we hear people talk about freedom of religion and freedom and concepts that I think are far afield from the ideas of like Medicare for all, minimum wage and other things. And to me, it shows that to a certain extent it's become a rhetorical election, an election where rhetorical ideas are, and this is always kind of the case in politics, but to me it's more heightened. I mean, we had some people mention they were anti-abortion,
right? That religion was an issue, or their faith and their belief system was an issue.
But the truth is, this is an election, to me, at least, and some of the people we talked to, where fear is hanging over everything. Where the issue isn't like, I'm going to vote for a person because they believe in a certain policy, but rather I'm going to vote for someone because I'm afraid of what's going to happen if I don't.
We are in such a fearful and anxiety-ridden state that we can barely talk about policy ideas. The voters that we've spoken to are all in a heightened state of anxiety and fear that their vote won't be counted. Whether they're a Republican in Lidditz, Pennsylvania, or an immigrant in Lancaster, people are so afraid that their vote won't be counted. It's almost as if they can't think straight about the issues that matter to them. We just want to thank you so much for your time. I'm Taya Graham. This is Jannis. We're your reporters for the Real News Network. Take care.